So welcome everyone to the monthly Arborist call. These typically occur the first Thursday in the month, unless there's some kind of scheduling conflict. So we typically follow the same agenda every time, kind of a welcome, and then we go over kind of updates on ZBRD and Zcashd. That's kind of a standard part of the presentation. And then we have or the session, I should say. And then we have a standard presentation slot where we talk about different things, like whatever the topic of the month is. That we would like to chat about in more detail. And then we just kind of, wrap it up freeform with any questions, comments, anything lingering, anything left to do, maybe to-do items for the next Arborist call, things of that nature. So for those that may not be familiar, Arborist calls are monthly calls where protocol contributors convene to talk about consensus node upgrade timelines and the process for network upgrades, R&D efforts, design and implementation of new protocol features, and just generally chat through anything that might be a blocker, unresolved issue, might need more research on it, and again, to-dos or action items for perhaps the next Arborist call or a future Arborist call. In terms of the purpose, the goal is pretty simple. We're trying to make protocol development accessible for a wider set of participants. With the dev fund that kicks in just a few days, a little bit later in November, we're really hoping to see protocol teams besides ECC and the foundation jump in and start working on protocol features. And we thought if we got this venue established ahead of time and got a few meetings under our belt and tweaked it a bit, and got it a little bit more well known, then other teams would kind of have a place to plug in. So that's largely the reason for doing that. In terms of who can participate, it's open to anyone who's interested in protocol development. You can join and engage with us. If there's something that anyone wants to present, feel free to reach out. You can reach out directly to me. There's my email address. Be more than happy to work out a slot that fits your calendar and timeline, and we'd love to have folks present. So with that, I'll turn it over to Deirdre to give us an update on ZBRD. Okay.
Cool.
There you go.
This update should be a little shorter than the last time. Most of what we've been doing for the past month is trying to get chain sync really reliable from Genesis block to tip, or at least 100 blocks in range of tip, from all the way, including checkpoint syncing and not including checkpoint syncing. So a lot of the stuff, besides dependency upgrades, have been kind of finding those little nitty-gritties around that. I don't remember if I mentioned this last time, but we've implemented a lot of the script verification, mostly for the Coinbase stuff, Coinbase scripts. We wrap the Zcash script as C++ library in a Rust crate in the Zebra project, in a way that we can call it asynchronously, and that is what this PR is doing. It's like actually calling into it when we need to verify those scripts as part of our chain block transaction and first Coinbase transaction in a block verification stack. Several of the things that we've been doing and are still working on in the past few months is a lot of testing around the syncing, both from Genesis to like a couple of thousand blocks in, and multiple places of note along the chain, and syncing forward from there. For example, like Genesis, sapling activation, where we stop doing the checkpoint syncing and we're actually have to do it all without any checkpoints. And like being able to test all of that reliably and pretty quickly as part of our CI. So this is one of the ones that we're doing all the time, or at least all of our environments that have reliable networking, which if you are using GitHub Actions, they have a lot of runner VMs that vary in like their network quality. So it's kind of funny how we have some of these turned on and off just because like on Windows, it's unreliable. On Mac OS, it is reliable, although sometimes not really. But we have these running, which is very nice to have. I think I touched on this a little bit last time, but we have our structure in for our async transaction verifier service. And we have a couple of consensus checks that are actually being merged in. We don't have them all complete yet, but we have stuff, I think over here actually, is like checking that the spend off SIG is valid, that we get from our value commitments. I think I left it in here. Yeah, no, sorry, the binding signature. This is all merged in, which is very nice because it just kind of falls out of there. I think we talked about the batch signature validation and the batch proof verification that we still want to do but aren't doing yet. This is one of the ones where we're just doing it ourselves without the batching yet, because it just kind of, we could just do this like arithmetic with our value commitments and it just kind of fell out. Or at least we're getting the key out. What else? This is a little config option that we added. So when you do use Zebra, we have a config file option. And we've made it so that when you are looking ahead for new blocks, we have like a max gap. It was around like 1,000 originally, and we're playing around with the networking behavior of like, if you're on like a crappy network and you have like 1,000 block requests going out at once, like sometimes half of them crap out and like you have to retry and things like that. And so we're kind of fiddling with that, but also making it configurable to anyone who's using it. And this is very nice for when we actually deploy this. This got merged in a couple of days ago. Zebra has a concept of finalized and non-finalized state. And finalized state is our last of series of checks of what is considered passing all the consensus checks. The structural validity, the semantic validity about like whether your signatures and your proofs are passing, and your contextual validity of, given everything else and everything that we know about the chain, is this block or transaction valid? And then when all of that is passed, we save it down to state. And that's the finalized state. But if you're within the reorg limit, which is about 100 blocks, that's non-finalized state, because there's a possibility that those could all get thrown away and we have to, you know, point the chain slightly differently. So we had to make sure that when we're querying things about the state, that we're not just including the finalized state, because a block that is just before a non-finalized block, it's still valid to a point. So we have to be able to query that. Smaller checkpoints, that goes along with the look ahead limit stuff. And I'm moving this because of Zoom. And a thing that I am working on, this is a thing that Jane is working on, which is more testing of, we have state checkpointed to sapling activation, and then we want to be able to search ahead from there and make sure all of our validation checks that are specific to sapling that would not get exercised if we just tried to sync from Genesis block to like a couple of thousand blocks ahead, that those are exercised in like top-down integration test way. And in order to do this properly, we needed to save all that state, which is several gigabytes of like 50 or 80 gigabytes or whatever. I think it's 80 gigabytes when I sync from Genesis to tip, which is 1 million and change blocks. To do that, we couldn't just sync the whole state, and our entire CI and everything that is kind of pushing you in the direction of modern CI doesn't like lots and lots of gigabytes of stuff that you have to sync down in order to run your continuous integration test. So because you're literally copying the bytes around the cloud, and so you would have to like sync down 80 gigabytes of data and then run your test, and like Docker doesn't like that, and GitHub Images doesn't like that, and all that sort of stuff. So what I did, or what I figured out I could do, is we build all of our stuff in a container and a container image. We have all of our state cached as a persistent cloud drive. We spin up a VM for every test run of our binaries, mount that disk as a volume, and then we run our integration test with a config file that says where to point the state at, which is the previously populated volume, and it runs against that. and this works. I just can't because of, well, there's some limitations with GitHub Actions about why we're not doing it pre-merge because of security keys and stuff in a PR. But it works, and it only the time is like the build and not the spinning up of the M or the mounting of the like 100 gigabyte drive. And this pleases me greatly. So we're gonna scale this up a lot for all of our very stateful tests. So like if you want to checkpoint at Canopy activation with like 100 gigabyte of chain state on your disk, and then exercise the continuous integration top to bottom of Zebra, doing everything new for Canopy and beyond from there, we'll be able to do that. And we'll be able to do that automatically every time we make a change to our default branch. So that makes us feel real good from a testing and like integration perspective. That hopefully will be merged. Well, at least this one version of it will be merged in a couple of days. Yeah, that's a lot of what's going on. Yeah.
Is it easy to like reproduce creating those drives with the state?
Yeah, what I do is I run the thing usually with an integration test to stop it at a specific point. And then I just take an image of that drive in the Google Cloud Console. And so I have that image forever. And then every time I spin up the VM, I create a new drive from that image. I make like a copy, and then I throw it all away at the end. And it's kind of, I call it kind of janky, but it works. So it's fine.
Oh, it sounds cleaner than something we may do. But just to clarify, do you write a test that says something like keep syncing until the height is blah and then exit with exit 0?
Kind of, yeah. So we sync. Here's an example. We have like some test code that does a lot of this work for us, but it's literally, let's see if I can find it. Yeah. So like we generate our config, we tell it where to look for our cache state. We make sure that we sync our database, our stateful database, to a specific height, and then stop. And then we point at that from our test. Yeah. And then like, this is where we want to sync to. And so it's basically the same as running your node, killing it, and then restarting your node, and it's still pointing at the same place. And so it just resumes where it picks off. And that's kind of what we're doing at a test level.
Yep. Thanks.
But yeah, this feels good. It's kind of funny because we were running some of these tests for a while, but we didn't have any output because of limitations of infrastructure and stuff like that. And now the way it's literally done is like we do a gcloud SSH into the VM, and then we run the command and get the entire console log out into the GitHub Actions UI for all perpetuity so that everyone can see it. And then we just throw everything away because it's all reproducible. It's cool. I like it. So that might be helpful. We have a plan to make our Docker images available when we do full-on releases so that you can literally just like Docker run like Zcash Foundation Zebra, and you don't have to worry about like dependencies or anything like that. We haven't thought farther about sharing the actual state of these disks. I don't know how to share those outside of our gcloud organization, blah, blah, blah. But maybe if there's demand for that, we can figure out how to share state like that. Yeah, let's see if there's any questions in the chat. Rust prop test. Yeah. Adding some test cases, prop tests, have a wish list. We have a lot of coverage in our code base around prop test for serialization and deserialization. And for originally, when we implemented most of the structs in Zebra-chain, that stuff like transactions and signatures and keys and spends and outputs and all of those things, and the proofs and how they're serialized and deserialized to the chain. So that round trip of serialization and deserialization is ripe for prop testing, because we want to make sure that that round trip is consistent. That's the property that we're testing. So those are like covered head to toe. I think we have like, because we have them in like the traits implemented all the way down, we can literally prop test a block, which is big, but you can do it. And now we're doing it for our state layer to make sure that everything that we're serializing down to our state layer and back up is also prop tested. I think Jane had a couple of those today, actually. In terms of a wish list, we have a lot of them covered. I can't recall any off the top of my head for a prop testing wish list. I think join us on the Discord or our GitHub repo, and we can talk more, and we'll see if there's anything we can point you at. Let's see. Do you have a roadmap for what functionality will be added to Zebra in what order? We have a roadmap, and we have several. I'll share a little bit more. We have several milestones on our GitHub in order of what we're trying to tackle. They're a little hard to parse in terms of like what is going in each one. Our first alpha release, which is supposed to be in December, early December, which is all about the correct syncing of mainnet from Genesis to tip, with a couple of consensus checks to make sure that we follow the right chain all the way from Genesis to tip. We will be implementing the rest of the consensus checks between alpha and stable. We'll probably be doing a beta between alpha and stable. Stable, we plan to have like rudimentary transaction creation and sending, all with a Zebra toolchain. The other things in here, transaction validation, wallet support, all this stuff are all subcategories of those two. After the first, so like first alpha is mostly syncing and like block difficulty and proof of work and all of that sort of stuff. First stable includes like just about everything you expect out of a full node. After that, we have to do planning. Like there's still a lot of stuff between where we are and first stable that includes the sending of the money part. But after that, we have to like do a little powwow and be like, okay, what's our future roadmap look like? And then a lot of things like Halo are influencing what that would look like. We have to figure out when or what that does to our planning as well. Okay.
Does the first stable, you intend for the first stable release to have wallet support or partial wallet support? Or
we have a design that we're kind of iterating a bit, but the idea will be that we will have a CLI that'll control your spending keys, and you will lodge your viewing keys with a node that you trust, like probably that you run yourself. And it'll do the blockchain scanning for you, so you can get your wallet balance and if anything is being sent to you. And then your little CLI will construct your transactions and hand them over to the node, and the node can disseminate them to the network. That way you can use all Zebra software to create and send transactions. That is our tentative plan to be included in the first stable major. That's why the first stable major is not December, it's coming later, because this was kind of pushed. We were originally going to have our first stable be just a full validating node, but there was demand for, can I send money with it? So we're going to include that as part of our first stable. Therefore, our first stable gets pushed out a little bit further into 2021. If you're curious about our design, there's a RFC, which is basically a design document on our repo that is still in progress, but you can get an idea. It's called Zebra Client Design, this one, which is number 1163. It still has some stuff.
Sounds like it's quite modular.
Very. by design.
Yeah,
Everything
cool.
in Zebra is very modular. Yeah, it'll be based on like a library called Zebra Client, and then the code for that of like constructing transactions and doing your spend off signatures and things like that and doing the proofs will be consumable by both ZebraD, the daemon, so that it can do blockchain scanning, and Zebra CLI, the command line binary, to actually do the parts that each part needs to do, but it's the same code base. It's just it's yet another crate.
So the daemon is going to hold the keys and do
No.
scanning?
Oh, the ZebraD will hold the viewing keys.
Viewing key, yeah, okay.
Yes. It should be considered inside your trust boundary for this version. This is supposed to be like bare bones. I just I'm running my node either on like a cloud computer that I trust or on my local or whatever it is. And here is a little CLI, or if you want to bundle Zebra Client in some other piece of software, that can accomplish a lot of what you're trying to do. Okay. I think I've answered questions and I've been talking for a while.
No problem. Thank you. No, great progress. Okay, let me get the screen back up here.
Yeah, very, very impressive progress.
So I'll be like Deirdre as well, probably move through this pretty quick. But just in terms of an update, just a few announcements. These are all out on the ECC blog. The ECC owners have donated ECC to a 501(c) nonprofit called the Bootstrap Project, which is consistent with the recommendations in ZIP 1014. I won't go into detail on that, but yeah, again, I'd encourage you to go read about that on our blog if you'd like to get the specifics. Also, right now, there's a Gitcoin grant program that is active. It launched with $25,000 in matching grants for Zcash related projects. And there's a number of very familiar projects in there already. I won't try to list them because I know I would forget someone, but there's great projects. And so if you're interested, go out there and definitely lend your support to that. And then Josh Swihart wrote a really good article. It's just kind of a, it's not a techie article, but it is incredibly well written, which is kind of Josh's experience and why privacy is important, to him. So it's a great read. It's a great reflection. In terms of Zcashd status update, we're continuing to make good progress on Halo 2. One of the to-dos was to choose a name for sapling on Halo 2, which was not to kind of repeat what we did with sapling, which was sapling was the protocol and sapling was the network upgrade. So we wanted a name that was distinguishable and applied just to the protocol. So Pollard was chosen. Pollard is another arborist type term. It essentially means cutting away certain parts of a tree to encourage growth. So we thought cutting away trusted setup, was a pretty good choice. We've made steady progress on multi-point opening optimization, zero knowledge, and lookup arguments. In terms of presentations, we've been active in the community on that. Dara and Yingtong presented a Halo 2 deep dive at the Zero Knowledge Seoul conference, which was really good. Sean also presented Halo 2 at the ZKPM Privacy Summit. We put out release 410 of Zcashd just this week. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Released a new version of the Zcash specification. And then we've been working for a while to switch over to Clang and C++ 17, which we'll talk about again a bit more in a moment. But the short version is it allows us to use Clang instead of GCC. And we can also start using some C++ 17 language features. So,
but by the way, Zero Knowledge Seoul wasn't a conference; it's just a one-off study club.
Oh, that's right. I remember now. Yeah, and
they do regular meetups.
Right. Okay.
And that version of the Zcash spec isn't quite out yet. I'm actually working on it as we speak, but it will be out in an hour.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah, so we'll pause here. There's actually a question from Chelsea. I have a question about Halo and timelines. It's probably a good time to answer that.
Yeah. Hi, Stephen.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, sorry, there's a little bit of background noise. I guess one, like it's kind of a question, it's kind of a comment. There's been a lot of discussion about Halo and basically how implementing Halo will impact the kind of like velocity of the community and like what the community needs to do in order to, I guess, like, I don't know. So I guess like my question is, there's an impact of Halo on the community and like what we need to do in order to ship Halo. And like within the foundation, we've had a lot of discussions about like our own planning, what kinds of things we need to do and things like that. I don't know if this has been expressed before, but I think it would be helpful for us to talk about timelines and shipping and like what things need to happen and just get in alignment with how do we make sure that the community is ready and like all of that. So I think that kind of discussion would be really helpful, maybe not now, but like early in the year to kind of consensus on that.
Totally agree. Yeah, and we're working. You know, it's kind of the main focus. I was going to say the core focus of the core team, but the main focus of the core team right now is kind of breaking down, you know, sapling on Halo 2 and how that fits specifically into Zcash. Our hope is in the December Arborist call that we could spend, you know, a good chunk of the you know, the presentation section, if you will, to kind of talk in more detail about that. So that would definitely be a great opportunity, I think, to get a little more insights into, and we'll also have a little bit more data on how that might look as best we can tell at that time, if that sounds okay.
Yeah, I think it wouldn't, I think it would be good for it to be kind of like a discussion, not so much of a presentation. And also I think there needs to be feedback from the community about like, not just how the Zcash spec needs to change, but like wallets and kind of like all of the external things that are going to be impacted by Halo, because these addresses are going to change due to Halo. Like there's a lot going on. And I think the community needs to get a really good sense of what is the scope of work. And it's not totally clear right now.
Mm-hmm. No, and go ahead, Dara.
It's basically another shielded pool like the sapling pool. Another address type, and from an external point of view, it will be almost identical to sapling. The internal cryptography will be different, but
well, right. So yeah, so that part is clear. What's not clear is how does that impact the velocity of what the community is working on. So like everyone is kind of, you know, we're like for example, within the foundation, we're shipping Zebra. There's a lot of work going into that, but shipping a new address type is a huge amount of work. And I imagine also for like wallets, it's going to impact them, testing, everything like that. And so I think there really needs to be a community call and getting feedback on not just within the Zcash spec, what has to change, but like integration wise within the exchanges, like all this kind of thing to make sure that everyone's ready for that kind of network upgrade.
That's a good point. And one of the things coming up, it's not on Halo, but it is about Canopy. We're kind of going over, you know, here's the activation prep work that we've been doing. And it's just kind of what we do every time. And of course, the large part of that is ecosystem outreach to partners like exchanges and wallet vendors and mining pools, of course. So yeah, it's a great point. And by the way, I didn't mean present like we would present like here's how it is, but you know, we'd have our collected thoughts so we could discuss it in the December's Arborist call.
Cool.
Yeah, I think it's necessary to explain some of the technical background in order that we can have that discussion.
Yep.
Yeah, I think everything that needs to change outside of the Zcash spec needs to be accounted for. And we need to look at it as a community, and we need to understand what is the impact, and is the community ready? And like, how does this impact some of the other work, like, you know, getting exchanges on board, making sure Zcash is supported elsewhere. And I think there's a lot of discussion, and I really want to make sure as a community we're ready. And I'm not totally convinced we are. And I think having that community call and having that kind of inventory of like where we are and where we need to go would be really helpful.
Right. Yep. Totally agree.
Yeah, can I point out something?
Yes.
So for sapling, sapling was like totally necessary for efficiency so that, for example, mobile wallets could work. Sapling, the upgrade was at the end of 2018, and just now we see mobile wallets in the wild that can do sapling. So we definitely want to do that ecosystem deployment planning to a greater degree with all future upgrades. So like for Canopy, I think it's relatively simple. Wallets don't need to change. Most, most folks can just apt-get update Zcashd. But for Pollard, this will be the first time that shielded wallets will be doing migration and also dealing with an address change. So we want to follow up with that. But the good news is that there are multiple shielded wallets that we can work directly with. And so we should do that proactively and make sure they're prepared and the design makes sense to them. And yeah, people are sort of aligned that it's a good idea.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Have you talked to exchanges to see if like this kind of upgrade, this kind of like breaking upgrade, like slows their timeline to support Zcash? Because like I guess like a concern I think we really need to dig into is adoption of Zcash is super important, right? Like that's why we're
right.
But with this kind of change, it makes adoption harder. And I think it's really important we look at who wants to adopt Zcash and what barriers are there and making sure that those barriers are as minimal as possible. Anyway, and I think that needs to happen in the context of this Halo discussion.
Right. I agree. And I think there's a flip side to that too, right? Like there's how does it foster adoption? Because there's the elimination of the trusted setup, right? Which
but no, so that's sorry, just let me dig in. So that's a values perspective, but in terms of engineering effort, barriers to adoption right now. That's what I want to dig into. We know the like value, and like no one's saying that Halo isn't useful. I think what we really need to dig into is in terms of engineering effort, where is this making things harder for people to start using Zcash?
Yep. Can I jump in again? And just to speculate a bit. So for example, Nighthawk Wallet is using our SDK. So presumably our SDK will support Pollard well. And for them, there will be like the UX challenges. But in terms of like the core software components, it should be a matter of like upgrading their dependencies and doing that sort of development work. By contrast, Gemini implemented a lot of their own logic to support withdrawals to sapling addresses. So presumably it would require working more with them on implementing this new crypto if they want to allow customers to withdraw to Pollard addresses. And we should follow up with exchanges. There's only a few that directly support shielded in the first place. So most exchanges, say Coinbase, they don't even know. I mean, they do still have to do integration work to support Pollard with like a new transaction format and stuff. It's just less of the crypto work. But yes, we should definitely be working proactively through the ecosystem so that basically the success would look like products ship Pollard support on the day of activation. That would be like the ideal, right? And then often in practice, we might expect Pollard support shows up sometime after activation.
Right, but I think with all these, I think it's super important to say, now that we're adding yet another variation on Zcash addresses, does this make adoption harder? And if it does, what do we need to do to make it not harder? Because we want people to use Zcash and we want people to use private Zcash, right? So I think, yeah, so all of us are, sorry, I know there's construction, but like all of us are like, yes, Halo has like very positive qualities, but in terms of the ecosystem catching up and having user adoption, we really, really want to have that discussion, so.
And
Okay.
dovetailing that with the maintenance burden of transparent, sprout, sapling, and sapling on Halo.
Yep, these are all good questions.
Okay. All right. Yeah, sounds good. Okay. Yeah. So we'll, obviously we can chat about whatever anyone would like in December, but we were thinking that would be a great opportunity to begin to kick off some of these discussions. So we'll have a little bit more insights into Pollard at that point. So I think that might be pretty good timing, actually.
Would it make sense maybe for that agenda, there might be 2 sections, and maybe one of them could be what are the challenges with shielded adoption in the ecosystem?
That'd be
does
great.
anyone want to prepare that agenda to bring to? I mean, it sounds like it could be discussion, but that kind of discussion, it helps to have lots of facts on hand, or
who has the most experience interfacing with exchanges?
Strad and Dodger?
Okay.
Strad Dodger, and then at the
It's
technical level,
varied.
for sure.
Varied.
Yeah, it varies across the ECC engineers. Then of course, from an outreach perspective, that's Andre does quite a bit of that, just in terms of checking in continually, checking on their upgrade status, et cetera. So
yeah, I'm always curious about like the communication, the relationship, the experience of exchanges like Gemini, especially about supporting shielded, or the reasons that they give, or at least the words that they use about not supporting shielded, or whatever, or what their code or infrastructure ecosystems look like in order to support any of these coins of whatever type. So if anyone has any of that information to bring in December, I would be all ears.
yeah, we'll see what we can pull together from
That'd be great. Awesome.
from conversations that various folks have.
Note
Yeah.
that some of the exchanges don't like us telling anyone about the infrastructure.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
within NDAs, and you can use, hand wavies. Like, well, there is a computer in the cloud, and the cloud is someone else's computer, and then they send code there, and then, a black box.
I think we don't need to be like, set exchange has this infrastructure. I think
No. I want more information, period, about.
Yeah, but I think at a high level for Zcash, I think we need to take a hard look at what it will take to have user adoption of private Zcash. And if right now what's preventing it is even moving to shielded, the like complexity of implementing shielded, then we really need to focus on making adoption and like building out what we have easier. And I think that's the main thing I really, really want to dig into, is why aren't people using shielded transactions now, and learn that lesson before we go forward.
Right. And yeah, so again, I think it's a great set of questions and areas to explore. One of the key drivers from a shielded adoption perspective from an exchange, and Dodger's on the call who can provide way more insight, is regulatory compliance, right? Like it's not a matter of we can't figure the tech out, or the engineering's way too hard, but we have to do it in a manner that passes whatever domicile we're in, the regulatory bodies that are governing in that domicile. So that's one thing. Now that kind of comes down to, and again, the expert is literally on this call. That comes down to education, working with these governmental agencies, which is essentially Dodger's full-time job. I don't think there's anyone any better at doing that. So that's just, me kind of out of my lane for a moment to just, one, give him, thanks for the great work, but then two, just to let everyone know how hard that is. And it's it's beyond. It's not just engineering, moving bits
Sure.
and bytes around. So.
That's great to know.
Yeah, no, we can go into more detail on both that side of things and then the technical challenges.
Yeah. Wasn't there like a?
Yeah, Sean said the same thing in chat. I didn't see it though.
I think there was a post or something you guys made a couple of weeks ago about how equating shielded ZEC to cash is like within the regulatory framework. Like if you can deal with untraceable cash withdrawals, then you can deal with shielded transactions or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Which was like me going like, yes, that's the point.
That's right. Exactly. It's what you get with your
Zcash.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Okay. No, great.
And that's why it's called that.
Yes.
Okay. Just before we move on, about adoption, about the technical hurdles to adoption, we, like I said, there are some new products. So like there's Gemini support, there's mobile wallets, and these are things in the wild, which is really valuable. And also hopefully Zondax's ledger support will be available soon. And so if we sort of loop that range of products in as sort of required users and ensure that Pollard works well for them, it might actually even be a really good opportunity to improve things for them. So I'm not sure about the details, but there may be tweaks we could make to make the ledger integration easier in the next iteration. Like they might have to do rewrites of parts for Pollard, but maybe the overall result will be easier for future hardware wallets, right? So I think it's not just hurdles, it's also some opportunities to learn from existing products.
Absolutely.
Oh, and we have Nighthawk and Zec Wallet on the call. They're going to do a little presentation on Zip 313 in a bit as well. So yeah, it'd be Nate, great idea. Great to have like all the feedback we can get, and like Juan over at Zondax, we've been working with him, but to kind of zoom out a bit and say, okay, well, how could we make it easier with Pollard, for example, than what you've done with Sapling? So, okay. No, sounds great. Thanks for all the feedback and comments on that. So I'll get moving here. Yeah, so we made some, I'll hit the Clang and C++ highlights. I mentioned that briefly. It's just a lot of goodness, right? It makes it easier to build. We can use one platform to build for multiple operating system versions or platforms, if you will. We can use newer C++ language features, which come down to some security things, some optimizations, et cetera. And because both Clang and Rust use LLVM as their backend, we can optimize across the FFI boundary between the two. So, okay. In terms of, just where we're at, well, again, we'll talk more specifically in a moment about Canopy, but here's just kind of the lay of the land. We put out, and I was way zoomed to the left on this when I took the screenshot. We put out 410 just earlier this week. The broken dash line there is kind of point in time. Canopy activates November 18th, and then we'll put out release 420, which you can't see, which will be roughly end of second week of December, just to kind of keep on our 6-month cadence. Rolling into some of the preparations that I alluded to earlier, for everyone's benefit, Canopy activates roughly in about 12 days, probably about 13 hours now. I took the screenshot earlier. The key thing is November the 18th at around 11:05 UTC. And that will vary by a few minutes on either side between now and then. What that looks like, obviously depends on where you're at in the world. On the East Coast, that's roughly 6:03 a.m. West Coast, 3:03 a.m. Singapore, 7:03 p.m. And then in London is 11:03 a.m. Just to give everyone a little bit of perspective of what time that will actually go off. We've already talked before about the zip, so I won't take the time to go into those. Other than at a super high level, Obviously, the dev fund funding zips, funding related zips are included. The Sprout pool was mentioned earlier. Zip 211 disables the ability to add new value to the Sprout pool. You can, and that's just a step toward being able to remove the Sprout protocol, which gets kind of the attack surface down, overall complexity in the in Zcash, et cetera. You can still transfer out, obviously, of Sprout. You can transfer within the Sprout pool, Sprout, if you chose to. Yeah, and then just a couple of other zips. Zip 212 improves security assumptions needed to ensure diversified addresses are not linkable. The main thing is it includes a new note plain text format for sapling outputs. And then zip 215 improves the validity of ED 25519 signatures used in Sprout transactions. Okay, so in terms of, yep, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt. For zip 211, I feel like we need to do more outreach there because the number of coins sitting there has really tailed off. I heard there were like a handful of migration transactions recently, but we don't know if like people have buried their Sprout keys in an island in the Caribbean, or if they just don't know they need to run a migration tool or what. So it's a really tricky problem, but presumably we should have a blog post or something saying, hey, look, here's zip 211, but you can still migrate, and you should pretty soon.
Okay.
Please.
That's a good point. I took that down as an action item, so we'll work on getting something out there. Yep, perfect. Okay, let me go back. In terms of activation prep, I'll pop back up here briefly. Release 310 will EOS halt right before activation, and that's by design because 310 does not support Canopy. So it will EOS halt right before activation. Release 410 is available now, as I mentioned, which gets us 2 releases in the field that will support Canopy, which is kind of optimal. Because in the event of any sort of hotfix or any sort of weirdness that was discovered in 410, you've obviously got a more stable like 400 to apply hotfixes to or whatever. So it gives us more options. That's kind of the main thing. We talked a bit in the discussion a moment ago. Oh, sorry about that if that was loud. Ecosystem outreach is underway and has been underway for quite some time. We work all the time with miners, exchanges, wallet vendors. So to date, as of just a little earlier today, over 80% of the mining hash power has already confirmed they've upgraded to a release 4.**. Gemini, Coinbase, Kraken, Binance, and other exchanges have already confirmed they've upgraded as well. We've got several wallet vendors, including 2 on this call: Zec Wallet, Nighthawk, Ledger, Trezor, Exodus, and Trust Wallet. Trust Wallet's actually still in progress, but they've confirmed, yeah, we're getting this knocked out. We will obviously verify back with them. We established a Tech Watch team, which is kind of consists of all the engineering and outreach groups at ECC that's active and basically on call and online during the activation in case there's any sort of issues that might crop up. We also run and monitor nodes that are EOS halting as well as the currently supported nodes. So in that case, it's 310, 400, and 410. We'll be running and monitoring those ourselves. In addition to that, we also monitor the network. We've got some really great tools that the dev infra team at ECC's built. We also monitor the network before and after activation. We look at things like peer counts, transactions per block, block interval, and/or difficulty, and then of course distribution of dev funds. We want to make sure that's happening like it should. Once activation occurs, we run a smoke testing suite that we have on 400 and 410 nodes after activation to make sure all the smoke tests still pass. And then we also just manually ourselves test various wallets. We have different exchange accounts that we have. We test those, withdrawals, look at block explorers. So basically we kind of cover the gamut during this Tech Watch to make sure everything goes off smoothly. Z.cache/upgrade/canopy has the countdown timer as well as information about the upgrade. And then if there were any late breaking information, it would obviously be there as well. So, okay, that's that. Let me check the chat really quickly before I move on. Okay, there we go. All right. Yep. So I believe we have Aditya from Nighthawk and Aditya from Zec Wallet. And I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a moment. And yeah, so did either of you have any slides or anything you want to present, or you just want to chat? Whatever you'd like to do would be fine. So however you'd like to do it, we really appreciate. And I want to thank you personally. That was really late notice I gave you late last night. Nathan had a great idea. That would be awesome to get you in here, and I just thought I'd take a chance and see if you were available. So.
Cool. Yeah. So I'm Aditya from Zec Wallet. The other Aditya is from the other Nighthawk wallet. But I don't really have a presentation or anything. I just want to quickly talk about
that's fine. That's perfect.
Change.
Yeah.
So we had a discussion with some subset of this group earlier this week, and what Zec Wallet has implemented is the change to the default fee to 1,000. I guess Z, how do you say that? 1,000 Zats, and all of it is also, so the change has been implemented across all of Zec Wallet. So all of the desktop and mobile wallets, it's all live now. It will activate, so it was originally supposed to activate with the Canopy upgrade height, but I have delayed it to activate after the grace period. So the 4 weeks after Canopy, the zip specifies the block number. I think it's 1.1080 K block. So at that block, after that block, all outgoing transactions would use the lower default fee. The most interesting thing is this will apply to Zec Wallet full node as well, even though, so it will override Zcashd's fee. So even if Zcashd does not upgrade by that time, Zec Wallet full node wallets running behind a Zcashd will also use the new default fee. But other than that, I think it was fairly simple change across all of Zec Wallet.
Hey guys, it's Addy here from the Nighthawk wallet. So for the ZIP 313 implementation for Nighthawk, we'll most likely follow the upstream Zcash Android wallet SDK, which I had a chat with Kevin, and it's going to be an implementation to update the default fee from 10,000 Zats to 1,000 Zats. And he did mention that there might be a librust library change. So I have to go and check back with him on that. But overall, the idea is we follow the SDK, and the plan is to roll out the update with the Nighthawk app update, starting from the Canopy release, if we can target that. So that's the general idea, that the window from the Canopy to the grace period is when we hopefully start using the 1,000 Zats and see how it performs on the mainnet. And yeah, there we have it, cheaper Z2Z transactions.
Right. Yep. Exactly. And I know Holmes is also doing that in ZBay, right? At roughly the same time block height, I believe. Yeah. Yeah,
he did mention he'll have to actually go up, because currently ZBay uses 200 as far as I checked their code base last time.
Okay. That's right. Okay. So he would have to go up. They were the smaller fees. We were looking at that one day and trying to figure out what those transactions were, but yeah.
Is Garda wallet involved in these discussions? Does anybody know if they're aware of the zip?
I don't think I've seen anything from them.
Okay. Here, let me make a note.
So as the zip author, I think I have some responsibility to notify the different top wallets. So I've been creating issues in the GitHub projects.
Great.
I'll be creating one for Ledger. Good. Yep.
Thank you. Yeah, it might be nice. I don't know if this would fit in the zip itself, but the zip might mention which projects have like signed on to it. I mean, I think that would be useful for me if I was reading the zip to see that list.
Okay,
I also
add
had
yeah.
I had a conversation with folks from Blockchair, which is a blockchain explorer, and they like privacy, and so they have various privacy features for different blockchains. And one thing they mentioned on that call is they knew we had a conventional fee and that varying that fee was bad for privacy. So they mentioned adding a feature so that if you go to their Explorer and view a shielded transaction that doesn't have that fee, it'll put up like a little warning indicator. So you might want to get in touch with them also. Would you like me to introduce you, or are you already in touch with Blockchair?
No, I'm not, and I would like if you could make that connection.
Cool. Okay. They might also, it might also be an interesting conversation for other reasons around privacy. So.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I was anyway planning to use their service for showing the price in the Nighthawk wallet, because currently we just show the ZEX.
Yeah, they're really aware of how block explorers are actually an Achilles heel for privacy. For example, most people who view a particular transaction are probably the counterparties involved in the transaction. So even if they have a super shielded private wallet that uses Tor, but then they just open up the link in their web browser when they make the transaction, it's not too great. So they're trying to address that challenge in various ways, which is pretty difficult. But so when you talk to them, you should mention that need. So for example, they might have a way, I know they have a Tor hidden service. They might have other ways to like fetch prices or information with a little bit better privacy than a standard block explorer.
All right, very good. Well, thanks, Aditya and Aditya, for again joining on short notice and just kind of giving us a quick update on your work. And thanks for creating the zip, by the way. That's exactly what that process is for. is for suggestions to improve the protocol coming from the community, who are actively building products, working with Zcash. So thanks so much for that. Number one, and number two, thanks for your work in working on the fees. So. Well, that was it. That was all we had for the call today. Is there anything else? We've got a few minutes. Anyone would like to discuss, or we could just wrap up early, a few minutes, whatever we would like to do.
Hey, who wants to do voting on the blockchain for like electoral positions? That sounds like a great idea, right, guys?